Thank you, and thank you guys for joining us today. My name is Bob Mitchell. I am the account manager for the Southeast for Purkeys, and on the other split screen is Larry Rambo. Larry Rambo, how many winters have you seen with Purkeys?
Well, this will be going into my 34th winter, I believe. 33, 34, depends how you consider that.
Yeah,
But yeah, I've gone through a few of them in the trucking world.
There you go. Well, we're going to be talking about, obviously winterizing your fleet for the upcoming winter season. Now, I'm from Florida. Winter consists of about a week for me, but from what I understand, most of you guys have a little bit harder winter. So we want to get your lift gates, your tractors, your reefers up to speed and talk about that. As mentioned before, if you have any questions, please ask them below. Larry and I will be monitoring that, and we'll be more than happy to answer any of those for you. But we're going to talk about the electrical systems in the wintertime. So obviously warm weather, everything seems to be going smooth. Everything's fine as far as the operating system on your tractors, your batteries, your reefers, whatever it may be. Your battery demand is reduced with the warmer weather. The chemical reaction that happens in that battery, it's pinging off each other because of the warm weather. Your voltage drop is minimal in warm weather. That's the good news. That's what happens in the summertime. But winter is coming, as Jack found out there. Cold weather, the drops in temperatures increases the demands on your cranking amps. Obviously, your batteries are rated with cold cranking amps, but that chemical reaction that happens in your battery slows down. Your starters face higher resistance. It's going to be harder to get them kicked up. Batteries, as I said, struggle to deliver power, and the voltage drop increases. Whatever the voltage drop was under that cold climate, it's going to be even more so. So why do problems show up on the first cold day? I spent 5 years with Interstate Batteries, and one of the things we talk about in the battery business is the heat destroys a battery, but the cold weather exposes it. That one cold snap causes those connections to not work, or the plates to seize up, whatever it may be. So as you can see from this little thermostat we have here, or thermometer we have here, when it's 80 degrees outside, your battery's operating at 100%. Your engine can only needs what it needs for power at 100%. But as that temperature drops down to 32, you see that your battery's only at 85% of its capacity, whereas your engine's going to need 165% to get that starter kicked over, like we talked about, to get that alternator moving. And then, of course, as the temperatures drop to zero, which doesn't happen in Florida, but happens everywhere else from what I understand, your battery is at 65% of its capacity at some point, and then the engine's going to need at least 250% to kind of get going. So that's why we talk about getting ready for winter. So we're going to have some poll questions throughout this presentation, and we're at our first one here. So we're talking about winter. We're going to talk about what equipment can benefit from a good winter PM. So if you would, take some time, tell us what you think. Which one of these is the correct answer? Which piece of your equipment can benefit from a good winter PM? We'll give you a few seconds to put those in.
And if you're not familiar with this, yeah, just like taking a test, hover over the A, B, C, or D and click it, and that'll be your answer submission.
And there's a pass fail in this, right, Larry?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll call people out if they get the wrong answer. Just kidding. Okay, looks like we got quite a few of our attendees have jumped in. Let's see what the answers are here. Looks like somebody said most people said all the above, and you are exactly correct. The person that said reefers, well, yeah, sure. Reefers can benefit, but lift gates and the tractors, trucks, they all can benefit from a good winter PM. And Mr. Larry is going to talk to us a little bit more about what we can do with that.
All right. Thank you, Bob. Great, intro to all this, what we're talking about. And one thing I do want to, kind of preface on this is, we talk about a winter PM for electrical. And a lot of our examples are going to be more of the tractor, with battery, starter, alternator. Well, the same rules apply on a reefer or even a lift gate. That's, no matter what, you have batteries, you have either a cranking motor to start it, or it may be a pump motor and a lift gate. But the same rules apply on all these things. So, don't get lulled and say, well, I only work on reefers, you're talking about trucks. Same rules apply, the same, tests have to be done. And, I'm very old school. Again, been doing this for many years. When we talk about all these things is, before we get into, the cold of winter, these are very important tests, just like we also do a get your vehicles ready for summer. That's, it's a different set of demands, but just as important, you have to do all these things to be ready. So when we talk about it is, the difference in, warm weather versus cold weather, and Bob touched some of that before. Winter or summer weather, engine's very easy to crank. The engine oil is very thin. It's easier to crank it. Most, even over the road trucks, nice warm weather, they can start with one battery. Obviously it doesn't work very well for all the creature comforts, but, that one battery can deliver enough energy to crank that engine. If you look at, mile or, very minimum, cranking current in a nice warm day, say it's 650 amps to crank that engine. If you have 4 batteries, each battery only has to supply 162 amps. Difference is that same starter, when you get, cold engines, it can jump up to 1700 amps very easily. Now each battery has to give, 425 amps to do that same crank. Nothing has changed other than just that much harder to crank that cold engine. One of your biggest factors on crankability is oil viscosity. The thicker that engine oil is, the harder it is to crank. What does that do? Again, the biggest thing is that starter load can easily triple. You sometimes go, 4 times as much, even more. Again, oil viscosity, many different factors, but no matter what, it's going to take a lot more energy to crank that engine in cold weather. And when we talk about it is, if amperage goes up, you're going to be pulling more current, your voltage drop's going to go up. So you're going to get less voltage at that starter or that pump motor or whatever we're talking about. So it can have a huge impact on it. It's a thing that, the thing started fine last week. What's wrong with it now? The other thing is, that all these, things, the biggest thing is nobody does voltage drop testing anyway anymore. That, that was something that used to be part of every, PM, was to actually do a voltage drop. That if you look at voltage drop, for every volt you lose going to the starter, you lose cranking speed. That it doesn't take a lot of voltage drop because of that high current, that you can't even spin an engine fast enough for it to start. Here's an example of the RP129. A lot of you, I see a lot of familiar names on the attendee today. We talk about this when we do multimeter training and everything. Is, again, nice warm weather, only pulls 600 amps. That's, this one pulls 600 amps, and we have a 0.5 volt drop in the cables. So this truck, as an example, is in spec, no harm, no foul, life is good. But you take that same scenario and you pull 1800 amps, look how much voltage drop you have. You're still within spec, but it shows, even one that's in spec, how much this impacts you. So the better off you can be about maintaining your cables and everything, the better off you always are. Excuse me. That, doing all these steps that, Bob's going to go through next, is we kind of nickname it the 1, 2, 3 training. Is you got to do all these steps. And again, highly recommend doing them before you go into summer and before you go into winter. And we'll talk about some of the test equipment too that does battery bank tests, things like that. In my opinion, none of those, take the place of doing a full service, taking everything apart, cleaning, and make sure it's tight. That, again, batteries are the heart of your electrical system. That if they're not right, nothing else is going to be right. Cold weather slows down the chemical reaction. That's why there's different ratings on batteries. Why it's very important whenever you use your battery tester, when it asks you different questions, what type of battery is it? Is it a flooded cell? Is it a AGM? Is it a thin plate AGM? Those all are different, criteria on how that battery acts. But no matter what, batteries are like me in cold weather. The colder they are, the less they want to work. So we got to keep those things properly maintained. And this kind of just shows you the difference in how those batteries, do react and perform as they get colder. Again, too, going back to the test equipment, that's, most test equipment's going to ask you, what the temperature is. That impacts how that, battery is going to be tested and what those test results are going to be. So very important you answer all those questions and do it correctly. But this is, again, just some of the example of why. That colder it is, less efficient it is, and it's going to have a different test result. Charging system is very important too. That's, we got to get those batteries up at 100%. So if the charging system isn't right, can it recover those batteries after a start? You look at, a lot of fleets use diesel fired heaters, so they're going to shut it off. They're not running the engine to stay warm. So when it does start, we got to get as much energy back into those batteries as we can. And if you have a defective alternator or, the wrong spec, all those things can manifest themselves as, a cranking problem when it's really a charging problem. That you can have the best battery in the world and the best start in the world, but if your alternator can't get them recovered and back up to 100%, it's not going to work. Some of those things that impact it too is, restrictions on how much you can run the truck. Idle restrictions, idle shutdown systems. It depends where the fleet has the parameter set for when the truck can idle or where it can idle. You look at, we're putting more and more stuff in the cabs for drivers, not just for logistics and safety and, laws, but, things to keep them comfortable. All those are going to add up and create, more loads for you. Again, as I said before, this doesn't matter if it's a truck or a reefer or a lift gate. The same rules apply to all these things. Wintertime, depending upon where you are, what you're hauling, the one thing that we found is pump motors generally don't pull any more current when it gets colder, but it takes longer to do a cycle. If it's nice warm weather, say it takes 10 seconds to run a gate up or down, well, that may go to 15, 16 seconds, which doesn't sound like much, but that's still a lot more energy being used simply because it's colder and it takes longer to work it. So just as important, we got to make sure all those cables and connections are good, get the energy from the liftgate batteries to the pump motor. And again, same with the reefer. One thing that really impacts reefers now is middle of winter, how much does a reefer have to run? If it's already, 20 degrees out, product's not going to, warm up, so the reefer doesn't have to run nearly as much. We still have a lot of parasitics on reefers for tracking, either whether, location tracking, temperature monitoring, just a lot of things are adding extra loads to those reefers. And if they don't start as often, it can have some real impacts too for you. So there's a lot of reasons to do all these things. That's a little bit of the science behind it. So I'm going to turn it back over to Bob now and let him kind of run through the 1, 2, 3 of, doing all the tests for these systems.
Yeah, he gave me the 1, 2, 3 because that's as high as I can count. So we're going to go through the 1, 2, 3 approach here just to get your fleets ready. Obviously, you can break it down by steps. It's going to be easier to digest. Well, obviously, we are talking about fewer breakdowns. We want to keep your fleet up and running. And that's the idea behind these webinars that we do. We're here to partner with you guys and to help. But anyway, the step one, and it is the most important step, is to test the batteries. As Larry mentioned before, the batteries are the heart of your electrical system. It's always the first thing to check. Whenever my kid brings me any sort of toy that's not working, I'm like, well, let's check the batteries first. Well, it's the same thing with your trucks too. Let's get a good look at what's going on there. So, obviously we want to make sure that we're at, 12.4 volts or higher when we're testing the batteries. We want to make sure that, that the batteries are in good shape to be tested, and they're going to give us a good readout that way. Taking the cables off the battery post. This is a really important step that I don't think enough fleets do, in the fact that in summertime and in wintertime, we want to kind of take these things apart and take a good look at them. just looking at the top of a battery post, you can go, oh, it looks good, everything's fine. But you take that thing apart, take the cables off, you see that there is some corrosion there. You see there is some gunk or whatever it may be. That's all affecting the charge. It's all affecting what's being put out by that battery. So we strongly recommend that we take all those pieces apart. We're going to talk about checking the cables in a minute, but we want to make sure that we take it apart and put it back together. And of course, cleaning that top of that battery pad, that lead pad there. We have a picture here of a couple different cleaners that we like to use, but making sure that that lead's getting scrubbed and cleaned up from all corrosion. Putting on lead adapters at some point as well. It's going to help out being able to test. And using a good battery tester. Some people, we've preached against using the test light. We want to make sure we know exactly what the battery's putting out. We want to use a good battery tester. And Larry, you've been around a long time. Is there a battery tester that you recommend or that you would help these guys with? What would be your suggestion?
Well, and it really depends on the fleet. Some of the requirements they have. There's all kinds of different things in the markets. We've been an autometer distributor for years, a good piece of equipment. There's many different models in that with, that a fleet can choose. But some of it is, do you want the ability to do test printouts? Do you want the ability to, store, information in the data? So really, if someone is interested, give us a yell. Be more than happy to spend some time making recommendations. But it's kind of like buying a multimeter. That you don't want to buy the $6 one that you could get free with bringing the coupon, nor do you need to buy an $800 one off a tool truck just to have the coolest piece of equipment. You want to buy the right thing, and talking about that cheap multimeter, you don't want to buy a hot dog warmer either. It's not something you're going to buy at the discount tool store for $40. Battery technology's changed a lot, and what we're expecting of batteries has changed a lot. The old-fashioned just a carbon pile has its place, but one thing that we really found that can be an issue is just a plain carbon pile can do a great job of checking a battery for a burst of energy, but it really doesn't do anything to tell you if that battery has any capacity left. So that's where people get in trouble. They can do a quote-unquote load test and a week later have a breakdown. It's not that the load test was bad or they didn't do it right, but it just didn't have the ability to say, hey, does this battery have any capacity or the ability to power off my parasitic loads or whatever when my driver's sitting somewhere. So to kind of summarize that, Bob, is give us a yell. We'll be more than happy to talk to you and make recommendations. It's not a one-size-fits-all by any means.
Well, and I will say any sort of battery tester that your technicians are comfortable using. If they don't like using it, then it ain't going to get used. So something comfortable, easy to use, but obviously that will do the job there.
Yeah, one thing too, I want to stress on that you started and just kick something in my mind is if you're a fleet manager, shop manager, whatever, just buying the shop a piece of equipment, your job is not done. You have to get training for your techs to make sure they understand it. A lot of the equipment now is, got an LCD or a tablet or whatever that walks them through, but you still have to have someone to show them how and the whys and the why nots. Why is it important to use the adapters? Why is it important to clean all these things? When it does this test, what is it doing? Because if they don't understand it, garbage in, garbage out. People will take all kinds of shortcuts, and then you still have battery issues.
Sure. And that's the one thing that we don't want to have. And obviously keeping good batteries and replacing defective ones. If you haven't talked about a recharge station at your shop, that's one thing that we could cover with you too with some help. But you definitely want to have a good recharge place for your batteries and know what warranty you're getting out of your batteries too when you replace them. So that's a big piece. But going on to step 2, we want to test the cranking cables. We're going to talk about cables quite a bit here because it's the often overlooked piece to the charging system. People just figure, well, one end goes here, one other end goes there, everything's fine, but you don't know what's going on with that cable, if it's how it's operating. So we're talking about testing the cables. Now we're testing from the battery to the charge. Some people will test all the way through the whole system from the battery to the alternator. We want to take it piece by piece and let's test the charging cables first. Obviously hooking up our voltmeter to I'm sorry, cranking. I said, yeah, it's cranking cable. Thank you. Yeah. So we want to set it up to the battery, set it up to the starter. And we want to, again, we're only the requirement is that we only have half a volt drop for every 500 amps. So we want to make sure that we're not exceeding that and we have that connectivity there. And then we're talking about testing the charging cables. So separately, instead of the cranking cables, then we're going to test the charging cables and testing the charging circuit similarly, making sure that we only have a half a volt drop allowed through that alternator's rated output. So after the batteries have been tested, we test the cranking and charging cables. Then we can test the alternator itself. So many times people test the alternator, well, it's putting out, but not going through and testing the cables that we just mentioned. So we want to make sure those cables get tested, batteries get tested, cables get tested. Then we can talk about what the alternator is doing at that point. So we come along to our next question for your perusal here. What is the TMC RP129 spec for cranking cables? Is it A, 0.50 volt while cranking, B, 0.25 volt per cranking at 500 amps, C, 0.50 volts total at 500 amps, or D, 1.0 volts at 500 amps? So if you take a second there and answer that, as we said before, you will be judged on this.
He's just scaring you. We can't see who you answered.
And while we're waiting for that, I do see a couple of people have asked a couple of questions. We're going to have I appreciate the questions. Keep them coming. We're going to have a Q&A at the end. So we didn't ignore you. We're going to hit those at the end. So it looks like some brave souls have answered, some not so brave. That's okay. Let's see what our results are here. All right. Looks like we've got 0.5 volts or half a volt at 500 amps, which is the RP129. So that is correct. So remember, as it states, D's not right. That's what I'm trying to say. So I'm going to pass it back off to Mr. Larry.
All righty. And for comic relief here, is Bob was playing with ChatGPT and AI and decided to make a funny of me in here.
It's Eskimo Larry. That's great.
Yeah. That's kind of how I want to dress when it does get cold, because we said, I'm like a battery. I don't like to work.
Yeah.
But yeah, and just a little bit of, wrap up too, and of what Bob was covering is, again, we name that, 1, 2, 3 training, because you have to do them in order. Is, you go through, you do all your battery tests. The reason why we do the cranking cables first is because they go from the battery to the starter. And so if you do have a, deficiency there, you're going to stop, take things apart, clean them, tighten them, make sure everything's bright and tight. Then you move to the charging cables, because almost every OEM runs their alternator cables from the alternator to the starter. So if you get the cranking cables to pass, but your charging cables don't, that tells you immediately it's between your starter and your alternator. That's where you got to spend the time. But if they're not right, it will impact everything else. And you can have, bad cables, but and they will cause an alternator to appear bad. It can, mess with the ripple pattern, all kinds of things, and show up other problems. So it's very important you do those things in the right order. But beyond that, what can we do to have a trouble-free winter? You got to look at the entire system. That's, we looked at the cranking and charging system, but we also have, the parts of it individually. Is, review your specs. And even talking about the voltage drop stuff is, we're talking about testing vehicles that are in service. One of those things I highly recommend every fleet doing is you got to get involved in pilot reviews. It's amazing how many fleets do not do pilot reviews anymore. Is when you are going to have, 50 or 500 or 5,000 trucks built, you want to look at the first one and do all these specs, checks on a brand new truck before you get 500 of them spread across the country. Is the first one right? Does it meet RP129? Because, these trucks are not fine wine, and they're not going to get better with time. So if they don't meet spec when they're new, you're setting yourself up for failure down the road, and there's nothing you're going to do to fix them. if the cables were, undersized, for the length they're having to run on that truck or whatever. So you got to go through all those things. But also review the spec of, what battery are you using? What starter you're using, what alternator you're using. You can kind of go through these a little bit in detail. And we had one, the question, is there a better battery pack for winter? One of the first things is you got to make sure you're using the right battery no matter what. But yeah, flooded cell versus AGM.
With that being said, I'm sorry, Larry, with that being said, if you have 1,000 cold cranking amps, is that the best application for every, best battery for every application?
No, and that's probably the one of the biggest, old wives' tales in the trucking industry, or even just in automotive period, is people always want to think that, bigger's got to be better. Is the higher CCA, the better the battery. And that is 100% wrong. That whenever you build a battery, you're trying to, make it do different things depending upon the application you're, making that battery for. Is you can make a battery with very high CCAs. You got your, 13-to-1, big block dragster, or your, cat dozer or whatever. Then the flip side extreme, the other direction is, something like a trolling motor battery or a marine battery, where you want lots and lots of reserve capacity. You got to find that happy medium, for a truck, because not only do you have to crank the engine, but you have to have enough capacity to, power all those drivers' loads while he's sitting somewhere. And all those things together will also add up to cycle life. How many times can a battery handle a discharge and recharge and still be considered a good battery? So there's lots of things to look into, but no matter what, you don't want to be buying a high CCA battery. Usually in flooded cell, our recommendation is 700, 750. That'll get you the cranking requirements to crank the engine, but it's going to give you a lot more reserve, and it's going to give you a better cycle life. And some of that goes into the flooded cell or AGM. AGM is going to be better across the board. It's still a lead acid battery, but it is a different construction, so they do have better numbers across the board. AGM is always going to be a better battery for you. But the one thing I will say, no matter what, is you have to buy a minimum quality battery to fit your application, no matter what. But if you go from a $125 battery up to a $400 battery, that expensive battery will not fix a lack of maintenance or a lack of a proper system. That the only thing that's going to do by, hey, I'm going to change and put these high dollar AGMs in, is you're going to have a dead battery on Thursday instead of Wednesday. It won't fix a lack of maintenance or proper speccing. The other thing you got to look at all those things is cost and what your warranty is going to be. That I'll sell you a battery and give you a 50-year warranty. I'm not sure you'd want to pay the price for it, but the price is in there. But one of the biggest things I always say too is all the manufacturers make a good battery if you pick the right one for your application. But some of the biggest thing is who takes care of you. Who's taking and doing your battery program correctly. I go to locations and they're buying batteries, not getting any customer service support. I was at a location the other day that had batteries on their shelf, brand new. They were a year and a half old. Why is your battery supplier not rotating that inventory for them? When you do have warranty, are they taking care of it? I don't ever trust anybody on batteries that, your job as a fleet is, if you do have batteries that came out because they're supposedly defective, you have to run them through a recharge program, test them, verify they truly are bad. And you have to, say, hey, I got 6 batteries or 4 batteries or 20 batteries that have been through our process and say they're, warrantyable. So it's not just, hey, it's a Group 31, throw it in there, life is good. The other things is looking for is almost everybody's gone gear reduction now. Is it the right kilowatt rating? I've seen some fleets do some kind of silly things, trying to save a few pounds, and they don't buy a starter that's really heavy enough for their application where they run. IMS or integrated mag switch. Used to be we had mag switches on the firewall. Now most starters put the mag switch on the starter. Again, what is the right one? Does it have overcrank protection? What's the warranty? And who takes care of you? Not only are they giving you warranty, are they doing any training, support you, make sure you're getting a good life out of it. The last component is alternator. You've got choice between a brush or a brushless design. Obviously, brushless is going to last you a lot longer. You don't have the wear of brushes. But the other thing too is amperage output. It used to be when I first started this, the highest output alternator we sold was 105 amps. Most everything we sold was 85. Now basic spec is 240, 260. So yeah, things have changed a lot, but not just the amperage output, but talk to your reps on these things and make sure when you spec a truck, how's it going to be operated. It's not one size fits all between a city truck and a road truck. That they've learned a lot with the EV market on performance curves, and there can be a huge difference on how that alternator performs in city driving versus road driving. That you may be better off with a lower amp alternator just because it's going to do more charging for you in the city versus highway. So again, a lot of things to look at on those things.
So are we ready? Go ahead. Yeah, so are we ready for winter? We're almost there. What else can we do? This isn't a poll question, but any of our attendees know what movie this is from? Let's give you a second. It's not a poll question, but it's my favorite guy from the Christmas Story. So that season's coming up as well. That'll be running every day. But
it's
what else can we do? Yeah, Virgilia. That's exactly right. So other things that we can do, we can talk about alternators, providing some creature comforts for your drivers. You want to keep the drivers happy, and alternators, obviously, inverters are a way to do that for what they're running inside the cab. We want to make sure that we have enough power for them, whether it's a microwave or a CPAP machine or whatever it may be. We want to make sure also it's a modified or pure sine wave. That's important because some of these, especially when it comes to CPAP, they don't operate off of the modified wave and can shut down. And obviously you don't want that happening to a driver that's dependent upon that technology. So another big thing for inverters is having low voltage shutdown. Great. He has all these creature comforts in his truck, but then the thing won't start because they don't have a low voltage shut off. When voltage got dangerous on the batteries, the alternator didn't cut it out. So that's obviously super important for when you're talking about fleets and what inverter to spec for your fleets. And there are some short power charging things that we can do that inverters are able to do that for them. And obviously, as Larry mentioned before, we always want to talk about driver training or maintenance personnel training when it comes to new things that we're putting into tractors or into trailers, whatever it may be. So solar, I love talking about solar because there again, I live in the state of Florida. We have to deal with the sun quite a bit. Even in wintertime, we're still able to harvest some of the power of the sun. The sun's out. It's not as intense, obviously, because of the distance from the earth, but there is solar juice to be had to keep your batteries topped off. And why is that important? Because anytime we can put energy back into the battery, we're going to be better off. We have what we call a temporary use panel, or what we call a solar dart panel, that can be moved from truck to truck. It's a great application for when we're talking about a truck that may be down for a couple of months, sitting in the lot, whatever it may be. You can move this from truck to truck. Real easy to use, but there again, it's going to offset some of those parasitic loads. It's going to put energy back into the batteries. And there again, in wintertime, you want batteries sitting at 13.2. You don't want them sitting at 12.6. So solar is going to be able to put that juice back into there. Along with solar, what we've had great success with is putting solar on top of tractors here. This is one of the applications that Larry and I have done ourselves. Repeating the same thing, but it is adding energy to the battery you don't want sitting. Offsetting the parasitic loads that you have with your GPS or whatever other parasitic loads you have on that tractor. That solar is able to put 8 to 10 amps of energy back into the battery as it sits in the sun. Obviously, sitting in the garage, not going to get as much, but out in the sun, it's going to do that. We have solar for liftgate applications. We're able to, as you see, the 3 panels sitting there on top of the liftgate, putting energy in as it sits out in the sun, back into the batteries, and of course on reefers as well. So we recommend solar. 5 years ago probably wasn't a great option. 10 years ago probably wasn't great. We weren't getting enough energy out of it. Now we're seeing energy coming in that's saving batteries. And there again, if your battery's operating at peak performance, you're going to get better battery life as well. So a battery can potentially last beyond your year, 2 years, whatever your matrix is for that. Larry's going to talk about battery cable kits.
Yes.
You get excited about battery cable kits. Larry, tell us about them.
Oh, I do. And that was something we kind of slid in last minute. We actually had a little panic situation trying to slide in at the last minute. One of the things we're talking about preventive maintenance and, making sure things are dependable. And I spend a lot of time with some large fleets, doing a lot of liftgate stuff, and see just a lot of things that give me great gas pains. And, fleets complaining about thermal events and all kinds of issues. That one is liftgates are probably the most neglected piece of equipment out there. People don't spend enough time, doing all the things they need to. And they just get very messy, depending upon what's spec'd in a liftgate trailer application. You got interior lights, solar, liftgate charging systems, things that reside on the trailer, telematics, interior lights, just tons of things in there. And I see where they've been, worked on by outside vendors, get moved from location to location, just all kinds of things. So long story short, we designed new sets of battery cables. And the whole idea was, hey, when you got a trailer comes in for a PM, it's a good time to kind of hit the reset button, get rid of all those old cables that are green and fuzzy. And, this was kind of the Cadillac set of cables we made for a fleet. But all the cables are now one piece. You don't have a separate cable from the circuit breaker to the battery, connecting in between the batteries. So it cleans that up immensely by being one cable. But the other thing too, and you kind of hard to see in this picture, but on the left side is a junction block for grounds, and on the right side is a junction block for all the positives. So all the other ancillary devices, you can move them off the batteries, put them on those junction posts on the sides. So when you are maintaining batteries, it makes it much easier. You take two nuts off, you lift the cable up, you can do all your load testing, makes it easier to clean and easily drop back down. You don't have cables getting left off, falling back behind, and it just cleans the battery box up immensely. Sure. And one thing is, talking about cleaning is when you are doing your truck service or your reefer service, your liftgate, part of that, doing all that is to clean all these things. One is the drivers, been having issues. You say, hey, we took care of it, and he opens up the battery box and it looks just as bad as the day before. He's not going to have a whole lot of faith that you did anything. So they're not Corvettes. You don't need to spend 5 hours detailing them. But I was at a location the other day and we were shooting some video, and the box just looked terrible. So, we just hit it with some degreaser and kind of rinsed them all off. Made a huge difference. Mm-hmm. So I do highly recommend you do that. And one of the questions I'm going to kind of skip to in this is somebody asked about battery protectant spray. Basically is, for years we had to use a protectant spray because, a lot of the cheap batteries out in the market were still an antimony additive type battery, which caused batteries to really gas. They would, seep acid, leak acid, and cause a lot of corrosion. So we had to do that. If you use the good battery, it wasn't too much of a concern. Now, our biggest concern is not, the battery leaking acid or whatever. It's all the stuff that's in the air and gets kicked up in wintertime, and you get such a chemical cocktail that you can get some really nasty corrosion happening on batteries. So you really have to use something. There's good battery protectant sprays. I got some fleets that just use, cheap spray paint. End of the day, the only thing you're trying to do is cover and protect the bare metal so it can't have corrosion. One of the biggest things I do tell people to be very careful of, if you use any of the sprays or greases or whatever, be very mindful that if you put all that stuff on there, over time it's going to break down. and you wind up the top of your batteries are covered with all the slime and grime and dust sticks to it and everything. Batteries will sit there and self-discharge through all that. So you have to be very careful. So, use it, very carefully, clean everything, tighten it, spray, brush, whatever, and just cover the bare metal. Again, you're just trying to protect it from corrosion. Do I have a preference? Not really. Anything you use, put on right, is going to be, probably sufficient for most things. But in between services, again, clean all that stuff. The one I looked at the other day, you just thought someone's been, hosing it down with, 90 weight gear oil, every other day. It was so caked with stuff that, you couldn't look at the date codes of the battery, nothing on it because they were just so dirty. All right, we got one more final poll question. And which one is not one of the benefits a fleet could see from using solar? This one does have a little bit of, comic relief built into it. People are slowing down on answering. I think I put people to sleep.
Well, Larry, honestly, I may not have covered a couple of these things, and they are true to form. So as they answer, we may want to go back and retouch it a little bit.
Very much so.
Yeah.
I think people woke up. We're getting a lot more answers now. And if you do have any question, we have one person that's put in 3 questions already. Anybody else, please feel free to chime in any questions, and we are going to have a Q&A. We're almost to the end, but please, no matter what, do not drop off because we do have some follow-up questions that will pop up when we're done with this. Our whole idea of doing webinars is how can we help you as customers? We want you to treat us as one of your employees, for, support, service, our expertise. We do know electrical. Do not call us and ask us about tires. All righty, let's see how our results are. Bingo. But
so, I'm sorry, Larry, since I didn't cover it, I figure we maybe talk about it now. How can solar reduce idle time?
Well, one of the biggest things on that is, when we have optimized idle or, any type of a start-stop system, is if we can keep those batteries at a higher state of charge, even before they, start their time off, it greatly reduces the likelihood that engine is going to have to start to recharge. So by doing that, it doesn't idle nearly as much. And by not idling, we can save fuel. Even when you get into EPU or the electric, air conditioning type systems, that if we can offset some of that load with solar, it's that much longer it's going to have to, or it can run without starting the engine. So reduce that, and again, reduce the fuel economy, or improve the fuel economy by less it has to run.
Sure, and that was the other question I was going to ask. And of course, the improved electrical system component life, I mentioned improved battery life, but you also get improved starter and alternator life. The alternator is not going to have to work as hard because the batteries are topped off, and the starter is not going to have to work as hard. So you're going to see all the electrical components benefit from having solar. And we have actually case studies where we have reduced idle time and improved fuel economy. We can't do anything with tires.
Yeah, can't help that at all. And the component life, one of the biggest things on that is you hit the nail on the head with starters. A starter can last forever. I've been in the Delco starter test lab, and they've got starters that, or test mule engines that they'll put a starter on an engine there in the lab, and it'll start the engine, shut it off, start the engine, shut it off. And they've had starters that go, 40,000, 50,000 cranks. The difference is it's got a set battery pack with good cables, so it's always starting on the proper power. If we have weak batteries, poor connections, poor cables, whatever, the reduced voltage is what kills starters. And the thing is, if you don't fix it and you put another new starter on in the same application, guess what it's going to do? Same failure. It does not like low voltage. All righty. All set. We just got a couple, kind of follow-up things on here. Some of our key takeaways. The biggest thing is cold weather. It's electrical stress. It hurts, makes everything have to work that much harder to do its job. Charging systems are critical. When it does start, it has to be able to put as much energy back in those batteries as possible. The biggest thing I tell you, preventive maintenance pays off. If you maintain these things, keep everything, bright and tight and, properly maintained, everything lasts longer. We had a guy call up, one of our lift gates, said the system wasn't working anymore. I said, what do you mean? I ran the gate one time and it's dead. It's like, what? Long story short, went back and looked, and the batteries were 7 years old. They had done everything they could. They just were completely out of capacity because they've been in there so long. That, quote unquote, they're full, but one cycle of the lift gate brought them down to nothing. Now, the good thing is in 5 minutes of runtime, they were brought back up to 100%. They just had no capacity left. It's kind of like having a hot water heater with having very hard water is, it started off as a 30-gallon water heater. Now it's so full of deposits that, it only holds 3 gallons. So, you better take a shower quick because you're out of hot water. The good news is it doesn't take long to reheat 3 gallons of water.
That's true.
Winterization checklist, again, go through these things. One of the things I highly recommend too when we're talking about batteries is invest in some paint pens. Whenever you put a truck in service or reefer or whatever, write the date of those batteries on it. You want to know how old those batteries are. Same thing with replacements. Put it somewhere easy, someone can see it and says, hey, I'm getting ready to do a service on these things, and these batteries are 3 years old. We got our money out of them. Let's go ahead and get them changed. Starter cables, charging system cables. One of the biggest things I recommend on that too is it starts when the truck is brand new. If those things don't meet spec when the truck is brand new, it is not going to get any better. And again, so many fleets do not do pilots anymore. We got to get back into doing pilots and make sure that stuff's there. We're happy to go to your pilots and check all these things, whether it's the truck and trailer. Even though we don't make a starter or alternator, we don't sell a battery, but our inverter's on that truck, and if that other system's not right, you're not going to get good life out of our inverters. There's things that we are very good on, there's things we're not. So we'd be more than happy to help with preventive maintenance, anything we can to support that vehicle as a whole. All you got to do is ask.
Yeah, and I'll put a shameless plug in there for us, Larry. Yeah, the 30-something years you've been with Purkeys, you've done a ton of pilots. You go out and train and talk to do multimeter test training, which doesn't affect our business, but we go out and help fleets with that. Purkeys tries to do a really good job of making sure we're supporting our fleets, supporting our customers, and I know we're going to continue to do so, but that's something that we don't get utilized sometimes. We're available to do that. We're available for pilot programs. We're available for liftgate charging systems training. Use us.
100%. Yeah. We get questions all the time. I didn't know you did that. It's like, I've told you many times. Why don't you ask? I was in Canada this week doing training for a fleet. And actually, my 4th trip to Canada this year, that we're not afraid to get out and get in front of people. And kind of one of the things you alluded to is when we do quote unquote liftgate charging training, the thing I start every class with is a multimeter class. Because one, if you don't know how to use a multimeter, how are you going to troubleshoot my system? But on top of that is your techs need to know how to use a multimeter for every system on that truck. So yeah, I can help you in other places too by accident. I'll be in Chicago next week doing training for the same fleet. All righty.
You're taking me to Hawaii next time you go there for training, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Get right on that.
Sure.
So we had 3 questions keyed in so far. One was talking about the uh, protectant spray or gel or anything. Again, many things, good battery sprays out there. Just again, be very careful what you use, or the
And the
quantity.
amount you use.
Yes.
Yeah.
You should not have to, go through 30 shop towels to clean batteries. I was looking at one of the tractor OEMs not too long ago, and I think they put grease on their batteries with a boat oar. There's that much on it. Is there a better battery for the winter? Glass pack, gel, etc. Again, AGM is going to be better. They have a lower internal resistance. It's easier for them to give off energy, easier to accept energy. It's still a lead acid battery. Pardon?
Yeah. Vibration concerns do not happen with AGMs. Of course, we're in the trucking business. Those trucks get rattled, and down the road, a lead acid battery could have a vibration issue. Something breaks loose. AGMs just don't have it.
Yes. They're going to cost you more though. So again, all those things you got to look at and find the better. But yeah, an AGM is better. It's still in severe cold. Even 50% better than, terrible is still terrible. So you have to make sure you maintain those things still and make sure the entire system's right. The biggest thing again is looking at, the right specs for your application and make sure the system is all matched together. The other question was, is there an additive for the hydraulic oil? Boy, I am no lubrication expert by any means. Biggest thing I'm going to tell you is get with, your liftgate OEM and see what they recommend. Some of them have some, just in my classes I've sat in with them. There's several the liftgate OEMs that I do a lot of training with, because it makes sense that if we're going to do training on the charging system, let's do training with the liftgate, people as well. And just from, listening to those conversations and people ask, there's some very good, year-round lubricants you can buy. It's kind of like engine oil. It's amazing how thin engine oil's gotten. And there's times too, it says, hey, if you're going to be this far north, you're either going to have to, change at winter, or it costs more, but go to this lubricant. So the biggest thing I'm going to tell you on that is get with your liftgate OEM.
There's a what DMM do you recommend?
There are 2 brands that we do a lot of work with and everything. Not saying they're the ones you need to buy, but the reason I do like X-Tech and Fluke is they both have good calibration programs. Why is that important? Is what are you supposed to do with torque wrenches once a year? You're supposed to send them in and get them calibrated, or there's companies that come by and calibrate them, that you have to make sure the thing's right. And that's why I like those, is you can send them in and make sure they're good. You see people all the time that's the thing looks like it's been through 30 years of service, and when's the last time you had it checked? Why would I do that? Well, how do you know it's right? Or again, when we go through multimeter classes, a lot of times tell the guys bring their meters and go through and we check just the leads, and they're way off from zero. And it's like, well, how are any of your resistance checks ever going to be right? Well, I just subtract the difference. It's like, what? It's like, no, you got to make sure it's right. But the biggest thing on meters is, buy something you can get it serviced. Buy what you need. Again, don't go to the discount tool store where you can either get the magnetic parts tray or the free multimeter. That is not a good meter. Same time too, do not get on the tool truck and buy the $800 one because you want to be the coolest guy in the shop. Buy a good quality meter that does what you need it to. And the biggest thing too is once you get it, use it. Is the only way you're ever going to get good at using a meter is to use it. And we do every January we have a multimeter webinar. It is recorded. A lot of our customers have taken that recording, put it on their own SharePoints or whatever too. Is that information's out there? But if you want to get good at using one, you have to use it and practice it. And I think that's it for
That's it, sir.
Yep, I think that is, unless anyone else has any last minute ones. But again, please do not drop off. That once I finally shut up, Bob's going to close us out and stay on for the survey questions afterwards.
I think that is the close right there. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you for attending here today. And again, we have a ton of other webinars out there that are recorded. If you want to look at liftgate charging, want to look at multimeter, whatever it may be, we're here to help you guys with that stuff. We're here to help your fleet with your electrical concerns. Thank you guys very much for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody.